Elon Musk is shoulder deep in the transhumanist movement, and that this sort of him being a salvific figure for conservative Christianity or conservative America kind of is a misnomer. You and I, as biological entities, are antiquated. We are done with. The evolutionary process, according to these transhumanists, is now occurring in technology at such a faster rate than biology that we are going to have to merge with the technology to sort of like a surfer stay on the leading wave of this evolutionary trajectory. That's kind of their framework.
O Lord of hosts, be with us, for we have none other help in times of adversity but Thee. O Lord of hosts, have mercy on us.
You know, for my work, I really went into the literature of transhumanism. I wanted to know, like, what is the philosophical underpinning? So when you're looking at epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics, for example, you know, their epistemology is often described as a sort of critical rationalism. This comes out of the work of Karl Popper, in which they reject justificationism. So I'm sure you guys listen to Jay Dyer, Father Deacon Dr. Ananias. You know, FDA is phenomenal at looking at philosophy and justification for presuppositional belief system. This is the whole point of like the tag apologetic approach, right? But that all works based on the necessity to justify true beliefs and how you ground true beliefs in a paradigm. Now, transhumanism actually rejects, coming out of Karl Popper, they adopt critical rationalism. They reject the necessity for justification itself in favor of falsifiability. And this was sort of novel movement of the 20th century, and how you can sort of get around some of the epistemological problems of the Enlightenment, right? So Joe Allen doesn't really go into that depth. He doesn't talk about, in regard to metaphysics, like what is the unifying force, what is the foundation of being within transhumanism. From my reading, I didn't see him talk about functionalism once. And so one of the things that I write about is that functionalism, which is a theory of mind. So for these transhumanists, like, you guys understand, metaphysics is about the sort of philosophy of being. And the metaphysics of transhumanism is really the way that they unify the world is based on functionality. So the theory of mind, functionalism, argues that mind, or what we call mind, is essentially an emergent property. So it has to do with the high level of synaptic connections within the human brain, and that the human brain performs all these functions. And this is how we know, quote unquote, it's conscious or sentient, because consciousness is the hard problem of philosophy, which still has no answers. And this is really actually something we were talking about in our members groups, my think tank that we met this past Wednesday. We were talking about, one of the gentlemen is an experimental physicist, and he was describing how all, you know, modern cosmology and theories built upon Darwinian theory of evolution, that these are abstractions upon abstractions, and that experimental physics actually kind of undercuts a lot of this stuff. And that's built on like actual science, actual experimental results. And you have then scientism building these paradigms, building these mythologies around experimental physics, but not really rooted in quote unquote science. And the same thing is true in transhumanism. So transhumanism has built this entire paradigm, which I would also agree with, and what I'm trying to argue is a sort of techno religion. Now, I spend a lot more time than Joe does in regards to laying out the historical roots of this techno religion, this techno millenarian spirit, from really John Scotus Erigena through Roger Bacon, through Francis Bacon, all the way into the 20th century. But he does make mention of this stuff, and that's why I was kind of impressed by Joe Allen's work. It is well done for what it is, as a more popular read and getting into the depth of transhumanism. It really does do that. I'm going to give him credit for that. But in regards to metaphysics and transhumanism, like, the hard problem of consciousness is still yet to be proven, right? This is why it's still the hard problem. And some people have argued this is why philosophy's been in a sort of dead end, because there's all these things that philosophy was trying to accomplish. Of course, it kind of undercut itself in the 20th century regarding epistemology, logical logical positivism, the knowability of the external world, phenomenology, existentialism, leading into postmodernism, all this different stuff. But there are still strong, good dimensions within philosophy. But transhumanism builds upon the idea that consciousness, which is still a hard problem, is yet proven, but the whole enterprise of transhumanism is built on a theory of mind called functionalism, which is different from identity theory. It's different from hylomorphism. It's different from these other theories of mind. And they argue that what consciousness is really just a performative function. And so if we can add 2 + 2 = 4, and if a calculator can add 2 + 2 = 4, we can see a sort of functional compatibility between these two things. And this is where they argue for advanced artificial intelligence becoming sentient. Now, how can something become sentient when they don't even know what consciousness is? It's a problem, but one that they don't really discuss, because for them, as long as the computer can functionally perform all that a human brain or a human being can perform, well, then for all intents and purposes, it has surpassed or is at least equated with a human mind. So I'm saying all this to highlight that some of the philosophical depth of transhumanism isn't presented in this book. And that gives me a little bit of hope, because this book's probably going to sell way more than my book's going to be. And that it kind of breaks my heart, but it lets me know that there is room to sort of build upon and maybe this book being a more of a popular read into transhumanism and its history will allow other readers to dive a little bit deeper into my work. Because if one thing I found out from doing this YouTube channel is the highly academic intellectual stuff is not the most popular. So I really like the nitty gritty, the in-depth, the highfalutin philosophy and academic jargon, but most people don't. Most people like a more popular read. And in that regard, Joe Allen's book, the Dark Aeon, is going to totally outperform mine in regards to it. And he has a platform. Steve Bannon has been promoting it and stuff like that. So in regards to ethics, I was just going to mention their paradigm, virtue ethics, utilitarian ethics. This is kind of the root of transhumanist ethics in regards to improving the world. It's much more utilitarian because it's much more about improving consequences. There's going to be a difference between like deontological ethics of like the Kantian tradition, where you have a moral duty. You have a moral duty to do something despite the consequences that may come from it, where utilitarianism is all focused on the consequences. That really dictates the good and what is best for the collective, right? So Joe Allen doesn't do that depth of philosophy, but overall, I'm pretty impressed. And where he does something that I'm going to kind of borrow from him is the immense connection he's drawn with Satanism and contemporary transhumanism. Now, obviously, much of the argument that I've laid out to you guys is that transhumanism is part of an anti-human satanic agenda. And we just talked recently about climate change, and climate change is really about this attack on carbon, right? So carbon is expanding from gas emissions and cow farts, and that we need to implement a new structure on energy, a new structure on the economy to reduce carbon. And I personally believe that this is a metaphor for life itself, that climate change, as I try to demonstrate in that stream, really does the exact opposite. And it being a sort of mythological narrative does the opposite of what it's presented to do. We even looked at technologies and all that different stuff. But anyways, transhumanism is also an anti-human, post-human agenda, and it really is satanic from a Christian perspective. One of my other critiques of Joe Allen's presentation is he's all comparing transhumanism to a Christian paradigm, but he never really lays out what type of Christian he is. Now, he talks about the L'Arc Catholic, the French Catholic tradition of being of a community based on being the sort of ark symbolic of Noah, but really focusing on the heart, being altruistic people, embodying the love and energies of Christ out in the world, which we're all for. He also criticizes the Catholic Church quite heavily and criticizes Protestantism and especially liberal progressive Christianity, all rightfully so. My work focuses more from a specifically Orthodox perspective. And that's where he's talking about self-deification, but nowhere in this book is the word theosis mentioned. Nowhere in this book is Eastern Orthodoxy mentioned. And I don't fault Joe Allen. Most Americans have never heard of Orthodoxy. Most Americans have no idea what theosis or our theology actually teaches. So I don't fault him there. But I don't think you can fully articulate the self-deifying process through technology that transhumanism is putting forth without understanding the deifying process of becoming gods through grace, that theosis that Orthodoxy explicitly lays forth and is part of the historical faith of the church, and all these other forms of sanctification that have got developed, aspects of it in Catholicism, aspects of it in Methodist Protestantism. But obviously, Orthodoxy is the groundwork for theosis and understanding how we relate to God, how we engage with God, and how we become deified in this process. So it's totally absent in this work. And that would be one of my criticisms, is that his Christianity, and he's constantly making references to looking at the beast system described in scripture, looking at 666, looking at descriptions of the Antichrist. But one of the problems is on what hermeneutic and what exegetical basis are you interpreting the scripture from? And for him, and it's not that he gets a lot of it wrong. I'm not even going to say that, but it's kind of a Protestant, like I can read it and come to ultimate conclusions because I know what's being said, where for us Orthodox, the tradition that's held all this stuff together, it is the exegetical and hermeneutic lens in which we read scripture from. And I think that's really helpful when we're looking at how transhumanism correlates or contrasts with Christian theology. So that's going to be one of my, Joe Allen is heterodox, and he uses Rudolf Steiner. So it's very interesting. Rudolf Steiner is not even exactly Christian, although he has very nice things to say about Christ. He has a significant portion using Rudolf Steiner talking about Lucifer and the conceptions of Satanism and the devil in contrast to Christ as a sort of framework that he's utilizing to couch transhumanism in, which again, for me as an Orthodox Christian and somebody who's trying to dive in and grasp and the contours of this topic in academic jargon, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. You know, Rudolf Steiner was a perennialist, and if you're against sort of relativism and everybody has their own truth, well, at a fundamental philosophical level, you using Rudolf Steiner kind of promotes and advances that worldview. But anyways, I digress. So we're going to listen to Joe Allen. We're going to hear him talk a little bit about this book. Do I recommend this book? Yeah, it's a pretty good book. It really is a pretty good book. Am I a little bit jealous that he got it out before my dissertation? Yes, I am. I'm a little bit upset by that, a little bit heartbroken. But I think the depth that I'm trying to approach this topic with will, in a way, sort of bolster some of his arguments, but in a sort of a deeper way. The ways in which transhumanism relates to Satanism and Lucifer is actually a sort of important topic. And I want to read that little article there by Max Moore talking about why Lucifer is such an important figure for the transhumanist movement in its opposition to Christianity and to Christ. So I want to do that. We're going to talk more about this topic. We're going to listen to Joe Allen kind of present the research of his book. And one of the things that he does do, I'll give him great credit for, is he really does a good job of highlighting the ambiguity of transhumanist political ideology. So looking at people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, you know, a lot of people would think that transhumanism must be part of this communistic one world government and that it all goes hand in hand. But really, when you look at the big movers and shakers, it's more of a diverse bag. They're more libertarian because they're all about individual agency, individual liberty. And he does a really good job at highlighting how Elon Musk is, shoulder deep in the transhumanist movement, and that this sort of him being a salvific figure for conservative Christianity or conservative America kind of is a misnomer. Not that he may not agree with some of our political ideologies or the limiting of government or advancing personal freedom like free speech. I'm sure he is. But as he highlights, the devil's champion, the Halloween costume he wore a couple years ago, which was his X profile pic for the longest time. Some people have really speculated about his spiritual orientation. And more recently, since I saw a clip where, he's giving out $1 million for his America PAC for people in Pennsylvania who sign up in support of the Constitution, that he said, I believe in Christian values and Christian teachings. Now, it doesn't say he believes in Christianity, doesn't say he believes in Jesus Christ, but in a way, potentially the sort of utilitarian usage of Christian teachings that maybe he understands as a foundation to Western civilization. And so in his attempt to sort of protect Western civilization, he sees that one has to protect, quote unquote, Christianity. But, him dressing up as the devil's champion and a lot of the technology, I mean, Neuralink, for example, is all about first healing people, right? So if you are a paraplegic, you can get a Neuralink, and then somebody who can't vocalize to you and you can't vocalize back, or you can now communicate through a digital interface in which it understands your brainwaves. Now, is that a good thing? If my mother or somebody of my family got incredibly ill and they couldn't speak anymore, and that some Neuralink may allow them to speak what I want? Well, probably not, because of my orientation towards transhumanism. But could I see a friend, or could I see people in the world seek value from a Neuralink implant that would allow them to communicate with a loved one before maybe they passed? Yeah, I could see why that's beneficial. But healing is always moving towards enhancement, and the explicit goal, whether it be Peter Thiel's Ambrosia, which was his Ambrosia was his startup company that I think is now defunct, but and I've talked to you guys before about living vampires, where you can inject the blood of younger people to rejuvenate tissue, which is a scientific fact. We know that's the case. Certainly gives credence to myths throughout history of entities or people potentially drinking blood or taking in blood of youthful people to try to rejuvenate themselves or appear younger. We see all these Hollywood stars talking about putting circumcised blood from children on their face to help get rid of their wrinkles. So this stuff it always begins with healing. Neuralink's going to heal the paraplegic. It's going to allow them to have a better quality of life. But Elon Musk, if you go to the Neuralink website, I've done this in previous streams, it is explicit that the only endpoint of our relationship with technology is a full merger with. So Neuralink, as it's being presented right now, is like, oh, it's so great for the people, the paraplegics or the blind that might be able to see again. And fair enough. But don't you see how this is a sort of inversion of Christ's miracles? This is a sort of inversion of man's dominion over creation, using technology to fulfill what are perceived miracles in the world, miraculous healings, helping people do things that they've never done before, leading towards the annihilation of the Imago Dei by a full synthesis with the machine itself. So Joe Allen does a great job at highlighting this sort of political ambiguity that a lot of people don't see. For example, Max Moore, who we're getting ready to read In Praise of the Devil here, his article, he himself actually despises Yuval Noah Harari, because Max Moore is very pro-libertarian. And so as the World Economic Forum is advancing the centralized one world government on a digital grid, despite Yuval Noah Harari's Homo Deus, who we talked about before, being explicitly transhuman, and his religion of dataism we've talked about before, Max Moore right here actually was, according to Joe Allen, reached out to him and was upset that he sort of grouped him in with all these WEF figures. So transhumanism does have differences of opinion within the groups of people, maybe political orientations, economic structure, stuff like that. But the goal is still the same end result. It is a human merger with technology for the sole purpose of what they perceive as evolutionary improvement. You and I, as biological entities, are antiquated we are done with. The evolutionary process, according to these transhumanists, is now occurring in technology at such a faster rate than biology that we are going to have to merge with the technology to sort of like a surfer, stay on the leading wave of this evolutionary trajectory. That's kind of their framework. So even Elon Musk, despite him being pro-Trump, pro-MAGA, doing all this stuff, free speech on X, which he says things that I may agree with, and I certainly support the movement of the Overton window on X, but we cannot lose sight of the fact that his fundamental worldview is a transhumanist agenda, spacefaring or civilization. This is replete throughout the sort of sci-fi novels that ground transhumanist prophecies and endeavors, right? So just want to highlight all that stuff. Smash that like, guys. I do want to do a few quick things before we totally get started here, and that is my dono chat stopped working during my last stream, and a few people had sent in a dono chat and did not receive my reading of their comments. And so I want to do that right now before we get started. I want to give a sincere apology to anybody who sent in a dono chat. We had 3, and the first one came from Sincere Hypocrite. This was on the climate change stream we did last week. And he said, climate change agenda is linked with Malthusianism. True. Just like many other secular neoliberal ideologies, only orthodoxy pushes back, and I can't wait to start catechesis at the start of next year. Well, glory to God, Sincere Hypocrite. Thank you very much for that $3.99 super chat. And Justin Henley sent in $20 and said, God bless you, your family, and all the champions in your live chat. Thank you very much, Justin Henley. Do appreciate that. And shout out to everybody in the live chat today. Smash that like. If you guys want to support my work, my research, and this YouTube channel, feel free to send in a super chat using Streamlabs, Dono Chat, or YouTube. And if you're really feeling generous, feel free to gift some COTEL Crew memberships here on the YouTube. I know a lot of people would appreciate that. And then Nectarios sent in also $20 and says, thank you for all the work you do. God bless you. Thank you very much, Nectarios, for that support. And then Justin Henley sent in $20 yesterday during the premiering of my conversation with Cody Lowe. I recorded a podcast about a year ago with Cody Lowe. He has a YouTube channel and podcast in which he wanted me to discuss the sort of historical relationship of psychedelics with Christianity, which I argue, based on my research, is really tied with the Gnostic tradition and a Gnostic heresy of inebriation and sort of spiritual gnosis or insight occurring during that inebriating process. And he said, have you any content specifically on Fools for Christ, or shall I sponsor a stream? And I got back to him in the live chat, but I just want to say thank you, Justin Henley, for the support. And I would be very happy to do a sponsored stream on Fools for Christ, because that is a topic I have not fully covered. It's been pieces of a stream, but I've never done a full stream going over the Fools for Christ within the Orthodox Church, important saints, their life stories, and what a fool for Christ really is and why it's important. So if that's something that you would be interested in sponsoring, please do so. I'd greatly appreciate that. So those were just a few of the super chats that I missed. And so before we dive deeper in today's stream, guys, I just want to do some quick housekeeping, if you will. And the first one is, if you guys want to support my work, one of the best things you can do is go over to my website and become a website member. Like I said, we just had a think tank meeting this past Wednesday. So this week we don't have one, and we will have another one potentially the day after the election. We normally do the second and third Wednesday of every month. So anybody who joins, some people have asked, hey, where's the calendar for where your think tank meetings? Think tank meetings are the second and third Wednesday of every month. And the fitness meetings are the first Monday of every month, for anybody who wanting to know. I do have a description saying all that stuff. But if you also want access to all my video library and all my show notes that I've been posting, that's just a $5 membership. If you get the annual subscription, you get 2 months free. It's a great way to support me and my work. I'd greatly appreciate that. Also, if anybody would like to sign up for a one-on-one session, you can do so with this link right here. I'd greatly appreciate that. We can get into a private Zoom meeting and talk about any topic your heart desires. And as Justin Henley suggested, potentially sponsoring a stream on Fools for Christ, you can do so with this link right here, of which I would greatly appreciate. This is for premium sponsored streams, of which I spend basically at least a day dedicated to researching the topic. Sometimes they're more. For example, the one on Russia Before the Second Coming, that's basically an 800-page book that I've been getting through. Although I'll only be presenting 3 chapters, I hope to do that either later this week or early next week, potentially Sunday. That's going to be the next sponsored stream we'll be doing. And so if you have a sponsored stream topic that you would like me to dive into, do some research, and then perform and present here on the YouTube channel, please use that link. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, if anybody is interested in some of our discussions on eschatology, again, the Russia Before the Second Coming is all over at eschatonvigil.org. I'm working with a non-for-profit called Eschaton Vigil, and we are in mostly the Eschaton Vigil. I haven't done so much, but translating so many eschatological prophecies and visions from saints and elders of the church into English for the very first time. So whether it be in Russian, Bulgarian, Serbian, Greek, whatever it may be, we're finding so many things that are only in those languages and translating them all into English and making the eschatonvigil.org essentially the ultimate hub in the world for English speakers to learn about eschatology and the visions of the end time by various saints and elders. So if that's something you would be interested in, check that out. Would greatly appreciate anybody supporting us there. So let me share that link. And we're going to soon be having a monthly meeting. So if you're a member there, you don't only get access to thousands of prophecies and full translations of books like Russia Before the Second Coming, but we're going to be soon starting monthly meetings. And in addition, once I can sort of finish my PhD, we'll be doing courses of various topics and stuff like that. So the whole goal is to build a really in-depth community focused on these topics and looking at eschatology and the approaching end times from an Orthodox Christian perspective. So major shout out to the Eschaton Vigil. And also, if you guys are in the market for any Orthodox items, be them icons, prayer ropes, although I got this one from Vashon Monastery where Abbot Trifon is, check out orthodoxdepot.com. It's a good Orthodox company here in the Midwest United States, owned and operated by Orthodox Christians. Use promo code COTEL. You'll get 10% off any products. And it's a good way to help me out, as well as an Orthodox company that has incense lamps, crosses, t-shirts, hats, all types of stuff. Use promo code COTEL and you'll get 10% off. Okay, now we can start to get into today's topic. So the first thing I want to say is just a quick little overview of this book. I want to say that what he does, the key dimensions of the Dark Aeon, is a sort of philosophical and ethical examination of transhumanism. He sort of connects transhumanism with historical and philosophical precedents, critiquing it as a form of technological determinism that will potentially strip away the essential human values in favor of a machine-driven efficiency. He also discusses the religious and spiritual analysis, although, again, my critique here is like, what form of Christianity, what Christian perspective are you coming from? He doesn't really lay that out. It's more just his reading of scripture and comparing progressive liberal Christianity, aspects of the Catholic Church, stuff like this. Again, orthodoxy is not mentioned once. Theosis is not mentioned once. And but he contends that transhumanism promises of immortality and digital salvation mirror but distort spiritual doctrines, turning humanity away from traditional spiritual pursuits. He looks at the socio-political impact and discusses how increased reliance on AI, biotechnology, and genetic engineering can deepen social inequalities. Very obvious there. And performs a sort of a cultural critique in which body modification, AI, and the increasing symbiosis between humans and machines, he suggests that these are cultural shifts subtly normalizing transhumanist values, which I agree with. One of the things that he doesn't capitalize on, that at least I'm trying to do, is I'm surprised with the Christian religious emphasis of this book. He does not connect the eschatological import, right? So looking at the salvific dimension of technology through history, really beginning in the Middle Ages, And he highlights David Noble's research, The Religion of Technology, looking at how technology was viewed as a way in which Christians who are favored by God were going to fight against the Antichrist. And this was actually held on to by many Protestants who were breaking away from the Catholic Church, and it fueled some of the Rosicrucian, Illuminati, Freemasonic associations with Protestantism too, in that, you know, the 30 Years' War, the Winter King, you know, Frederick the Elector Palatine sort of being elevated as this hermetic Christian Protestant king figure that's going to sort of take in the esoteric knowledge of history lost with Christianity and create this sort of utopian kingdom. This was part of the Rosicrucian manifestos, but all of that is tied with eschatology, and he mentions it briefly, especially regarding Joachim Fiore. If you guys are familiar with the Cistercian abbot who believed in like the 3 ages of history, but one of the important strands of transhumanism as it relates to Christianity is that it is ultimately a competing eschatological vision of historical time. Transhumanism is obviously in a favor of a sort of progressive unfolding of novelty and knowledge and advancement. And that then culminates in an endpoint in history called the singularity. You guys know Ray Kurzweil, the singularity is near, all this different stuff, where essentially through Moore's law, the exponential increase in technology, they believe that they're going to reach a singularity and an exponential endpoint in which technology will become so advanced, so intelligent, that one AI will surpass the collective human intelligence on Earth, and it will begin a feedback loop, cybernetics, a feedback loop system of self-improvement and self-defining and coding itself, writing its own code, all this different stuff, in which there will be a runaway effect, and technology will be so powerful and so dominant that this is the transformation. This is the historic endpoint. You can see how this is an inversion of the second coming of Christ. We are building through the Tower of Babel the AI God that's getting ready to emerge in comparison to the transcendent God who is going to come in imminent space and time. And this eschatology fuels the endeavor of transhumanism, and fuels transhumanism is really a religious orientation, right? I mean, it's quite clear. This is fused with scientism. And this is one of the things that Joe does a good job of in this book, is talking about how scientism really is a replacement for religion as viewed by many people in the 20th century. And that is the case. Scientism is replete with an aura of sacredness in our contemporary society. The man in the white coat really is the priest of the 21st century. And this is why I think the coup in 2020 and Dr. Fauci and getting your Fauci out was so detrimental to the religion of scientism, because it called into question this whole consensus reality. Scientism is not based on consensus, but we are now told through things like climate change and the coup that we have to listen to the science. We have to listen to the scientists. We have to listen to the priests in the white coats who aren't actually performing science. They're regurgitating a mythology in which we have to abide by. If not, we are bad little boys and girls and probably need to be punished and deplatformed. So transhumanism ultimately is an eschatological worldview that is built upon whether you believe minds can be uploaded into a computer. I personally do not believe that to be the case. I do not believe that the mind is a emergent property that functionalist theories of mind accurately describes. I believe it's tied with the soul that really is made in the image of God, and that our noetic faculties are divine, are unique to us, and not something that can ever be replicated in a machine. And so that is a dimension of this transhumanist Christian relationship that I would say Joe kind of misses on, but I'm not here to, this isn't a immense critique of the book. It's good for what it is. It actually is really good for what it is, but ultimately it's an eschatological vision. This is one of the things that I hint on, and he talks about self-deification, but again, the lack of Orthodox understanding or any reading of Orthodox theology. And when listening to Joe talk, what I've listened to a few, he does seem very critical of the Catholic Church I'm curious what his opinions would be of orthodoxy, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was very critical of these sort of traditional forms of religion. I'm not sure. I'd be curious what his thought process is on that. I've never heard him actually address or say anything about orthodoxy. But anyways, therefore, all that being said, transhumanism really is a satanic ideology that is competing with religion from an orthodox perspective, and is interested in, again, an inverted form of theosis. So you're going to merge with God. Well, which God? The AI God. And I have, at least in my work, I've documented multiple articles in which these transhumanists talk about how their God, unlike the people that believe in traditional religion, their God is a natural entity. They believe that intelligence, and this is one of the problems with transhumanism too, that I've never heard defended by a transhumanist, is the random mutation of Darwinian theory, which is obviously essential to their worldview. Because of Darwinian theory, their metaphysics, there is no essence, there is no nature to human beings. You exist on an evolutionary spectrum of becoming, and therefore the only thing that unites life is through functionalism, the theory of mind, which then therefore grants space for cyborgs and artificial intelligence and robots to be categorized as other forms of life based on their functional capabilities. That this Darwinian theory, there is no there, right? And so for transhumanists, one of the things that I've never heard defended is, how is it that evolution is leading towards increased intelligence, which culminates in the advanced AI? Meanwhile, Darwinian theory says it's total random mutation. So are you telling me there's a telos to evolution? Their theory essentially states that as fact. And they say it all the time, that evolution is leading towards greater and greater intelligence. And they say this is based on the fact that Homo sapiens exists and we are the superior apex species on the planet, and therefore this logically concludes that evolution is leading towards the creation of higher forms of intelligence. Well, if that's the case, it's not totally random mutation, and therefore then evolution has a telos, a purpose, an end in sight, which they again equate with the AI God. So I've never heard a transhumanist actually address that. Yeah, Harari, exactly. JC Owen says Harari says evolution has stopped. And essentially what they claim is that biological evolution takes multiple generations to occur, and technology is advancing so fast that within one generation, evolution can occur in technology, at a multiplicated rate. Whereas biology, we will essentially stay biological entities with very slow evolutionary progress unless we hitch ourselves to the wagon of technology. And so transhumanism views our understanding of the incarnation differently, right? Because it's essentially saying that the AI will become incarnate. So there's multiple things here that transhumanism is doing that is explicitly an inversion of Christianity, which transhumanism comes out of Western civilization. So it's replete with Christian motifs because it comes from that cultural ethos. So the AI becomes sentient. This is a sort of reversed incarnation, not as a person, but as an abstract technological awareness. That you, theosis, you will become like God, not by following Christ, not through the uncreated energies, not through a moral and pietistic and ascetic life, not through the perseverance through suffering, but by allowing Elon Musk to put in Neuralink implants, by allowing genetic engineering, by all these different things, by cryonic preservation, so that once the technology allows you to upload your mind into a robot body, that you'll be there. And so eschatology, deification, the incarnation, all these things, and there's multiple more, but that's not the point of today's stream. So we'll, if you guys want, I can do a stream specifically on the inversions of Christianity and transhumanism. There's many more. Like, for example, again, this isn't the point. So let me just say this as a quick side note, and then let's get to the actual point of today's stream. But, their rejection of the body, right? So for the transhumanists, they worship intelligence, they worship mind. This is why Yuval Noah Harari and his religion of Dadaism is so emphatic on the belief that you and I are algorithms. that we are biological algorithms. The only thing that differentiates me and you and a tomato or a giraffe is the amount of information that we take in, our ability to process that information and come towards conclusions. And so if a robot, if an artificial intelligence is also, it's a synthetic algorithm, not a biological algorithm, and it can come to conclusions and cipher through information and be connected with machines that are exploring space, well, then that's a superior form of intelligence. And so they worship the mind, and you can look at Desjardins' omega theory. It's essentially a hive mind, a collective mind, in its absence of a body. Where Christianity, Christ's incarnation, tells us that the body is special. This is actually a unique religious dimension of Christianity, is the dignity of the human body, that God himself took on human flesh. And so this incarnation also brings into this inverted understandings of the human body, and how transhumanism is, again, another sort of religious orientation that is clearly contrasted with traditional Christian notions.